Hey guys, Waddock Studios here, and previously today I did a video breaking down Embark's strategy on the rendering pipeline where they've used a custom branch of UE5. So this was 2 videos ago, but essentially they've used a custom branch of UE5 with RTXGI and DDGI. I pulled that over the NVIDIA plugins for DLSS and the RTXGI plugin to 427 and did a kind of a comparison in my return to retro assets. It was a really good project for me to start off in. I've done previous videos covering software ray trace Lumen. So anyone who was familiar with that content in the Return to Retro series would have known like the baseline cost that I was getting in software ray trace Lumen. This series has started, I think, in 5.3 and has went through 5.4, 5.5, and is now in 5.6. So we've also seen where there's been some performance improvements in UE5, including the 5.6 hardware ray traced Lumen performance improvements. So I figured, based on comments that was on this video, what I would do is go ahead and open this scene up in UE5 with hardware ray trace Lumen. So if we go to the project settings and we go to Lumen, you'll see that we do have Lumen enabled. We have hardware ray tracing enabled when available. And if we go to lighting, actually it's going to be under shadows. You'll see that ray traced direct lighting shadows are enabled. So, yeah, we're pretty much like a one-to-one with what RTXGI would do with the DDGI method. However, again, this is not a probe-based system, so it's going to be a bit heavier. And in the vein of sticking with UE5 defaults, instead of DLSS, we will be using the TSR anti-aliasing method for temporal super resolution to basically scale the screen percentage to the equivalent of what would be DLSS's option over here with the RTXGI plugin, where you're able to with the DLSS plugin, where you're able to set like balanced performance, etc. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit play here, and we'll start taking a look at the scene. And I'm going to go to F11. So we'll do a stat unit just so we can start getting stats up. Stat FPS, and we'll do we're at 100% screen percentage right now. So the good news is that, similar to RTXGI, where you're ray tracing your lights, the scale of ray trace lighting is I don't want to say the scalability as you add more lights is a little bit more forgiving. So it's not like cascade shadow maps where, you know, you're kind of paying for that extra draw for every cascade, for each resolution breakdown. You know, as you back up, you're going to get this kind of these lower resolution cascades to where, you know, sometimes you'll get that shadow pop as you move around. The other thing is that you can see that my input latency is pretty horrendous without any type of scaling. And and just so you know my specs, I'm on an RTX 2080 Ti. So, you know, and there was like a little traversal stutter right there, which is funny because I'm not even running Nanite. This is just a traditional LOD, HLOD scene. Now, visual clarity, it's funny because it was mentioned about the noise in the geometry on the bottom here, but you can in the RTXGI. But again, that flicker that you're seeing on this part, this panel here, is traditional of rasterizers that have these grid shape grate type patterns. At a distance, you'll start seeing distance traversal on them like that. That's just kind of normal. But the thing that software Lumen is really bad at is artifacting, right? So it's not a hardware ray traced method. So this is a much cleaner result than software Lumen, but I figured I would give a performance comparison to actual ray tracing instead of software Lumen surface caching. So yeah, the scene looks pretty good. Now, if we go to do what we would do in DLSS, let's go ahead and apply the screen percentage, and we'll go all the way to like ultra performance, right? Which is going to be 50% screen percentage. So we're down to like PS1 internal resolutions right now. And as you can see, the artifacting on the grate of this walkway is far worse than what I would now call the part 1 of this video, where I was covering UE4.27 with RTXGI. And it's not just here either. It's pretty much a crawl happening even up on the ceiling, on the surface there. There's some basically denoising artifacts happening in some of the shadowed areas. There's some specular crawl happening on curvature, and we'll just continue to walk down here. It gets pretty bad in motion. Like that's the other thing that people complain about in UE5 is in motion things start looking like smeared mud with TSR. It's just, you know, everyone has their opinions, but I find it to be not the cleanest upscaler and temporal resolver. But yeah, in a still scene, you get a really good clean render in a lot of places. I still think I prefer the RTX DDGI of this, especially if you look off in the distance over there. You can see like there's just a ton of noise and a ton of shimmering where the denoiser is suffering pretty bad. And right here up underneath this thing, you can even start to see the, you know, without the DLSS, you know, ray reconstruction going on, you're getting reflective noise happening in the floor. And then for whatever reason, the RTXGI plugin seems to handle ray trace distant shadows a lot cleaner than Lumen hardware ray tracing appears to do in UE5. So we'll go into this other scene over here now. Again, I was looking at this scene over here and saying that it, you know, if I didn't know any better in a still shot, then, you know, I would mistake this for baked. The fall off on the lighting on the hardware ray tracing does appear to be pretty good, even with, you know, like Lumen's method. I'll say the tone mapping for the Lumen color tone is a tad different than the RTX GI, you know, DDGI method. And again, if I'm standing right here, I stopped right here and I kind of compared the reflections in the puddles to DDGI, and we'll compare it here with hardware ray tracing. And if I'm being still, it's not so bad. There's still a lot of crawl and a lot of noise on the far puddle over there, but down the hallway, the shimmer is just, there's a lot of visual artifacts happening, even up there on the little cable, and up here as well. And it's funny, like even this, I remember this shadow being crisp and tidy and clean, and the denoiser is kind of suffering here a bit. So yeah, traditional things. Now we have a little bit of overhead. I'm pushing 100 frames per second, right? So we can probably clean some of this up just by bumping the screen percentage up to like say 65, and we're at 80 something frames. Now you can see that, you know, the reflections have cleaned up quite a bit. There's still a little bit of shimmer. Down the hallway has cleaned up a little bit, but it's you know, it's still pretty bad. And I don't know what the threshold would be to actually get that clean, but I can tell you, like, this shadow is dancing like it's in a freaking club over here in my peripheral, and that's pretty distracting. So yeah, we'll bump this up. Let's just go all the way to 100, shall we? Let's see if that going up to 100 will clean it up. Yeah, and I'm still getting pretty bad flickering down that hallway. Now, I'm curious. Let me walk back over here. I'm not going to be too harsh on the grate just because I know that that's a hard thing to really cope with. But yeah, up there on the light on the far side, still a little bit of noise there. And just looking down that hallway is, and the top of that cart over there is just dancing around like a jackrabbit. So, yeah, I think this is, even if you throw hardware ray tracing at Lumen Global Illumination and Lumen Reflections, this pretty much speaks for itself. Yeah, we can break 60 frames per second. I was pulling 200 in DDGI. And I was running in balanced mode. I wasn't even having to cut all the way back to like, let's just say 65% to bust 90 frames. And the more I pull this back, things just become more and more unstable and start shimmering around and dancing around. So yeah, stability in the image appears to be like, the biggest complaint. I think that's the biggest complaint of most people that are dealing with Unreal Engine 5. Outside of that, the rendering quality is pretty decent. But I do understand now why Embark chose to go with a different method that gives them a much more stable image. And then based on also, the input latency and the frame time, chaos is just, it's just heavy. Character movement total is way up there. You start moving around and it's half a millisecond. Like, well, it's not too bad. 0.12, 0.16 milliseconds, but yeah, it's still just much heavier than what the old PhysX physics thread was. So let me see if I can get... The other thing I've noticed too is the draws compared to UE4. It feels like auto instancing is having some issues because the draws are in the multiple hundreds of draws. And I remember looking at the draws here in UE4 and it was nowhere near that. The other thing too I've noticed is that UE5 is a memory hog. We're at 4.24 gigs and I don't believe we were anywhere near that in the other scene. But yeah, we'll get rid of some of this. We don't need SWRT anymore. We don't need that game anymore. I wonder what the memory utilization is being chewed up on. Texture streaming pool has multiple, so it's like only 1 gig worth of allocated memory there. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, maybe it's just TSR chewing it up. But yeah, I figured I would do a part 2 of the original video that covers some of these changes. Again, probably shave some of this off by going DLSS instead of TSR and maybe even get a little bit of a cleaner scene out of this. Instead of some of these things shimmering and dancing around with these artifacts. The other thing I guess I could do is turn off hardware ray tracing, and again that would pump it down. I think it would probably be around, it's 15% or so, so it would probably be Well, we would want to do it both for lights too, so I guess I could do that. We could go over that real quick. Let me shift escape. And we'll do F10. Let's type ray tracing. That's probably the easiest way to find it. We won't do this, and we won't do this. And we won't do this. And we'll restart, and I'm going to pause the video real quick. Okay, and we are back. And we are in software ray trace Lumen mode. And we will start this guy up and do all of this stuff again. Stat unit. We will do stat FPS. If I can spell, we'll do t.max FPS just to make sure that we're not capped out. And yeah, in software ray trace Lumen, we are at 70 something and some change, and this is at 100% screen percentage. And you know, we're still getting kind of the shimmering and dancing here on the panel. We're getting it on the box over there, and this is at 100% TSR. You know, the shadow quality is going to be a bit different. You know, you're going to get the CSM cascade shadows popping in here on your point lights. You're going to get shadow fall off on small nudges, so you're not going to get that same transition that you see on the top there. You're going to get a little bit of light bleed in software ray trace Lumen, so behind these guys where, you know, it's pretty illuminated directly behind them. You don't have that AO that you normally get from hardware ray tracing. It's not a bad trade-off though. It's still pretty decent looking. And you know, we get some of that performance back, and due to not needing to cut down TSR a bit, you get a little cleaner image down that hallway over there. But yeah, if we want to start upscaling, cut this back a bit. Let's just start at 50. You can see like now the dancing and the artifacting starts up again. And this is where like the reflections and stuff actually suffer a bit more in Lumen software ray tracing, and you know, SSR blending versus the hardware blending. The reflections are just kind of null. They're not really there. It's just kind of a smoky image of what might be a reflection. But I mean, for what it is, you can't be too mad at it. Like here where these hoses are touching, you can tell it's kind of struggling to deal with the AO at the base of these guys. So it's still a pretty decent scene though. Like, I mean, to be hitting 130, 140 frames, you know, it's not 200 like what was happening in Unreal Engine 4, and you're dealing with a lot of noise still from software ray trace Lumen. But it's not a horrible still image or still frame. Yeah, I just looking at it in motion and looking at it when I'm like feeling it as I'm moving around and seeing some of these cascade shadow map pop in as you traverse the world with software ray trace Lumen. There's a lot more artifacting happening, just different nuances. Now here's the thing: the denoiser, the cascade shadow map, is actually cleaner than the hardware ray trace lumen and the hardware ray trace shadows, which is, you know, really strange because the RTXGI implementation was pretty slick, pretty clean, pretty nice. But yeah, anyway, I figured I would go over that just to do a part 2 really quick. A lot of people were asking about it in the comment section, so I figured I would do it. This way you have an apples to apples kind of comparison side by side on the same hardware. You know, software ray trace lumen, hardware ray trace lumen, and you can go back and watch the RTX DDGI video with 427, and yeah, have a complete picture. Anyway, until next time, guys, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Consider joining the Wildlock Studios Discord. Links are down in the description. Check out part 1 of the video if you haven't already, and happy developing. Toodles.